Hey, what's going on, guys? A couple weeks ago I made a video going over 7 items that I'd like to see implemented into Temtem. After making that video, I decided I'd follow it up with 5 features that I'd like to see implemented in Temtem. Now, I won't be including any features that are confirmed to be coming, like the trading house or the battle frontier equivalent or clubs, because that'd sort of make this video redundant. I will, however, be going over some rather interesting ideas that I thought would specifically add to overall endgame playability and replayability. So without further ado, in no particular order, here are my 5 proposed features for Temtem. The first one I want to talk about is NG+. Now, I know there is a Nuzlocke mode coming, but what I was thinking is more like how Dark Souls or how Kindred Fates is planning to do this by making the subsequent playthroughs more difficult, but adding perhaps better items, higher Luma odds, etc. It doesn't have to make the game have insane odds for Lumas, like for example NG Plus could have like a 1 in 7,800 chance instead of 1 in 8,000, or the odds could get better, even smaller, up to like NG plus 5 or plus 6 or plus 7, like having a cap at maybe 1 in 7,000 or something to that extent. A feature like this could also be good because it can make farming Pansuns a lot more enjoyable, as you could sort of speed run through the game. And as for items like telomere hacks, they could always just replace them with something else in subsequent playthroughs to avoid making them overpopulated in the market. As far as like keeping the levels scaled go, perhaps each playthrough after your first will lock out your previous team until a certain point in the game, and instead of just artificially increasing levels, they could also give tamers better teams and movesets. There would definitely have to be a lot of tweaking on Crema for this, but I do think being able to play through the game again and again without completely having to restart your progress would be nice. Also, on a side note, I know the Vault is a thing, but NG Plus would include a lot more than just bringing items over. The second feature on this list is raids and or boss battles. Now, I see this idea working a lot differently than what we see in a game like Pokemon Sword and Shield. I'm not really a fan of how you only get to throw one ball at the bosses, the way the bosses' shields work, turn limits, etc. My idea here would work a little bit better in my opinion, but let me know what you guys think in the comments. So firstly, I'd like these bosses to definitely spawn at varying levels, and to be technically soloable to a very strategically minded max level player, but also allow for teamwork. I think 4 Temtem, like in Pokemon raids, works well. You can either have 2 people use 2 Temtem each, or 4 people use 1 Temtem, or if you have 3 people, you can have a combination of one player using 2 and the others using 1. It can be set up so each tamer only gets a limited number of Tems, so you can't just use 6 times 4 and just obliterate the boss. Instead of the Temtem being Dynamaxed, I could see each being well beyond the level cap instead. Imagine facing off against a level 200 Temtem and having to work around its superior bulk and power to succeed. I don't exactly know how the levels would scale out exactly, but they could have lower level raids and higher level raids, with the lower level ones spawning more common Tems while the higher level ones spawning more rare Tems. Now obviously when you're catching that raid boss, the level of it would have to decrease. You can't just catch something that's level 200. Raids could also include higher Luma chances, and more noteworthy in my opinion, various drops, i.e. Pansun, Silicon Chunks, Tem cards, etc. And of course, the better Tems will drop better items. I think these sort of bosses would allow for people of every playstyles to enjoy the endgame significantly more if this did exist. The next one's sort of an umbrella of features, and that's to add more MMORPG elements into the game, specifically in terms of varying levels that can optionally be grinded out for better rewards. Look at a game like RuneScape. You have like a cooking level, a construction level, a wood cutting level, a fishing level, a mining level, etc. Now, obviously, I don't expect Temtem to add all of these features, but I do think a few could act very interestingly. For example, fishing, which they'd have to add a fishing rod for, mining, construction, and a player level. For fishing, granted they add the rod, they could have it so that every time you hook a Temtem, you get XP, and the higher level you get, the better Tems you can find while fishing. Plus, there could be like higher Luma or higher SV odds if you're a higher level. The level also could perhaps affect what type of rod or bait you can use, and perhaps that's how that'll work to the whole higher odds thing. Like better rod equals better odds. And they can have items like SV bait or Luma bait, something like that. Now, mining would be interesting as it would make use of the crystal mines in Tuckma. Apparently, according to the lore, Tem cards are actually derived from the mining process, so I imagine there could be a crafting system subsequently as a result of the mining system that sort of allows you to create various items such as perhaps bag upgrades, silicon fragments, chunks, etc. It would also be kind of nice from a thematic perspective, since one thing about Temtem is that not everybody in the universe is obsessed with the Temtem specifically, and people do different things. This could be one of those different things. As for leveling, I guess a higher miner would get better drops, I'd assume, something to that extent. As for the idea of like a trainer level, this would be more of a notoriety thing than anything else. I could see it perhaps increasing catch rates slightly, maybe Luma rates, SV odds, etc., drops from raids even. Perhaps they can have discounts in the stores for really high level trainers, something to that extent. I figure in this sense, catching, battling, fishing, etc. would net some XP towards that level. The rewards in terms of the formerly mentioned can cap at like trainer level 50 or something, but I think they should make it so that there is no level cap to the trainer level. The trainer level won't give you a competitive edge or anything to that extent, and any levels beyond the cap would essentially just be cosmetic and to sort of show off how much time you put into the game. But I do think it's a rather cool idea, especially if it shows up next to your username when walking around. The fourth feature on this list is another concept for many MMORPG games, and honestly I'm not 100% sure how they'd implement this, but it could be really interesting. What I'm talking about is a wilderness-esque PvP area where tamers can sort of spot each other and attempt to battle you. This area would have to be quite large, and I could see them putting some of the best farming spots and items here. Perhaps this area won't have a 6-tem limit, as if you're constantly getting 6v6 challenged, it would be annoying, but maybe you can have a limit of 2, so you can have rapid PvP battles. Losers would lose something like Pansuns upon defeated, and winners would gain some. I could see you being able to set like a vision radius for your trainer and walk around, and if you see a player, you get to sort of challenge them. They could also use the area to implement some games like Capture the Flag, where you storm people's bases in attempts to capture them with full PvP, just for an example. This idea may overlap with clubs to an extent though, so I think this one is the least likely on this list, but interesting nonetheless. Now the last one that I think is really cool and could perhaps be feasible if enough people beg Crema is dungeoneering. So I'd imagine there'd be randomly generated dungeons with various wild Temtem, perhaps large boss battles like I mentioned earlier, group co-op, etc. Basically imagine the Chalice dungeons from Bloodborne, but converted in such a way that it can exist in a Monster Tamer game. As for most features, I'd expect this to spawn certain loot, perhaps have increased Luma odds or SV odds or whatever. They could even have monthly events where these dungeons sort of change, and there's these randomly, or maybe not randomly generated dungeons that you can travel through with a group or something to that extent. It would be interesting. A lot of these features many of you may have seen in other MMO games. However, one of the biggest complaints about Temtem is that it doesn't truly feel like an MMO. I think at least some of these features would help to curb some of those complaints and bring sort of a broader spectrum of players to the game. But anyways guys, make sure to let me know what kind of features you'd like to see added to Temtem. And for more Temtem content, make sure to like and subscribe. Until next time, peace.